Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I was tempted to speak up in favor of this acquisition of 13 acres of prime Zone 1 endangered species habitat right where we need it, on the top of Bull Creek, where the most biologically diverse caves probably in North America exist. But I'm against it because you're buying it to tear it up with one or two, it's not clear, 40-foot diameter, 100 to 200 feet deep construction shafts through the Edwards Recharge Zone, through the endangered species habitat, to build a plant that at this point we don't know what it costs. And you're proposing to pay $2.2 million for this 13 acres. Has anybody on this council looked at the appraisal to justify that price? I haven't, but I'll guess that the comparables are the water treatment plant site itself, where you paid 2 or 3 times what you should have paid, where the city auditor started an investigation of that gross, obscene waste of public money, but the investigation was squelched. Then Travis County had to buy BCP Cave Preserve, paying obscene prices with taxpayer dollars based on that purchase. And now I assume here we are yet doing it again. As Ms. Blythe pointed out, last night, or the night before, your Parks Board voted 7-0 to not take action until the environmental studies were completed. The studies are not even done yet. You don't know if this site can be engineered for these shafts without doing severe damage to Bull Creek and Headwater Springs, to both listed endangered species and Jollyville salamander. For a project that at this point you don't know what it costs. You were told 20 months ago, in January of 2009, that Water Treatment Plant 4 would cost $508 million. That number has stayed the same. There's not a $13 million line item in that budget for this purchase. That estimate included the Forest Ridge transmission main. Now we're told mysteriously that's put on hold, and that number's not being counted now. So we're getting the same number, but we're missing a transmission tunnel. How much is this thing going to cost? How much is too much? When are we going to insist that we actually have real science rather than junk science engineered after the fact to fit the decision already made?
Thank you, Mr. Bunch. So I'll entertain a motion on item number 3. Mayor Pro Tem moves approval of item number 3, and I will second. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Morrison.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for staff. Maybe you could help us understand the timeline. I have some concerns about not being able to get a Parks Board recommendation one way or another on the mitigation. And could you give us a sense of when the environmental studies are going to be complete and how that would, I assume from your perspective, that might interfere with construction if we take those studies to the Parks Board?
You're asking when environmental studies for this site or for the PARD site?
The studies that were requested by the Parks Board.
Well, we've completed considerable environmental work already. First, the BCP itself is set up to mitigate for golden cheek warbler as well as karst invertebrate habitat, and there's extensive documentation, environmental studies that were set up with regards to those matters, and the utility corridors that we're using through the BCP are all fully mitigated for those species, and we'd have extensive documentation for those elements. We have been in a preliminary engineering and design on this project for quite a while. We've invested about $5 million on the Jollyville line through the preliminary engineering phase, and that has included extensive environmental work, including analysis of water. We have a groundwater model that's being developed, various geotechnical activities. We feel very comfortable at this time recommending both the purchase of the Chipman site that's on the council agenda today, as well as the use of the park site on the opposite end of the BCP of this site.
Yeah, thank you for that, but I'm trying to zero in on the Parks Board was requesting the results of certain studies that aren't available yet, and when would they be available?
Well, as a part of completing our design of the project, we would put together, all the sub-environmental work that's been going on, the recommendations from the environmental commissioning, which is a separate part of our project team, and we would produce a final report there. But we've completed extensive assessments of the PARD site. We did a salamander survey. We, again, did evaluations of if there are critical environmental features in the working zone of the site, geotechnical work, groundwater modeling, and that we have various elements of that in technical memorandums, and we would need to put that into a final report before completing the full design process. But again, based on all of that evidence, it's not premature to be recommending the acquisition of these sites.
But I have to go back to my question, and that was the Parks Board was interested in certain environmental studies, and it's my understanding they're not available yet. Is what you're telling me that everything that the Parks Board would like to see is available?
It's not, everything's not in a final report, but all the information, and again, from my perspective, that the Parks Board would need to make a decision, we have provided. And Parks Board was non-specific in terms of their additional request. They just said complete additional environmental assessment work and come back at some future date.
So when will the environmental assessment work be completed?
Well, again, in terms of the acquisition of the sites that we're after, we believe that we have completed all the necessary environmental work to make recommendations to acquire those sites. The tunnel project itself is over 6 miles, and we still need to complete the design process, get that ready for construction bidding, and as a part of that, there'll be additional environmental assessment as we complete the design process.
Okay, well, I guess I'll get in touch with my Parks Board member, because it's my understanding there was a sense of incompleteness in the information that they felt they needed to make a recommendation, because I'd like to be able to sort that out and really figure out the details. Thank you.
Councilmember Spell.
What was the basis for the price, $2.24 million for this tract?
I'd like to have our real estate person address that.
Great, thank you.
Mayor, Councilman Lorraine Reiser, Officer of Real Estate Services. The Chipman's tract was appraised based on the highest and best use, which is currently a boat, motorhome, vehicle storage yard. It has over 100 units stored there. So what the appraiser did is looked at the income stream of that property, and that's the main use of the main way of valuation of this property.
When was that appraisal done?
The appraisal was done, I believe it's been within the last 6 months.
And so it was not tied in any way to the proposal on the tract on which the water treatment plant itself is being built?
No, sir. It was based on the income that the property is currently producing.
And it was done the last 6 months. And are we paying the appraised value or some value other than that?
Appraised value.
Gotcha. Thank you, Lorraine. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I have a very short question for Greg, too, if I could. Greg, why on earth are there plastic bags over the names of the drilling companies on the trucks?
I can't say for sure why they did that. I think in the past, when we've had work drilling on the site, some of the firms have perceived, because I can't speak for them directly, that they are harassed by surrounding people calling their home offices, reporting them as doing illegal work to the police and regulatory authorities. And I think they have responded to that by covering up the number on their trucks.
I think there's a lot of people out there who believe that there are black helicopters out there and believe that there's also sort of surreptitious government action. And if we could persuade them to remove those black bags, I'd sure appreciate it.
I think that's a solid suggestion, and I will see that that happens.
Motion on the table to approve item number 3. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. I believe that's on a vote of 4 to 3 with council members Riley, Morrison, Spellman voting no.